Welcome back. Last night's primaries gave us the latest example of Democratic voters pushing for generational change. In Connecticut, 47-year-old former Hartford Mayor Luke Bronin easily beat out 78-year-old Congressman John Larson, who was first elected to Congress back in 1998. Bronin ran a campaign calling for new, younger energy to fight back against the Trump administration. Congressman Larson is now the 12th incumbent to be ousted in a primary this year and the 7th House Democrat. Joining me now is the Democratic nominee in Connecticut's 1st District and the former mayor of Hartford, Luke Bronin. Thank you so much for joining me, Mayor. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to be with you.
Congratulations on the win. Let's talk about your message. We noted that Congressman Larson, now the 12th incumbent to lose in a primary this year. Do you feel like you are part of the anti-incumbent wave that we seem to be seeing in this year's midterms?
I think I'm part of the movement that's saying, we're at a moment of crisis in our country. We've got a president who is out of control, an economy that feels broken to most people. And we want to see a Democratic Party that's bringing a whole new energy to this fight, that is clear and courageous and bold about the things we're fighting for. And in a moment when everything is at stake and things haven't been working, we can't just keep doing the same thing.
If you do win, what will your day one priority be? What will your first action be?
I think the first action has to be to do everything we can to stop the damage from this president. This president and his administration should be getting a whole bunch of subpoenas that help bring to light the scale of the corruption and the damage that they are doing on a daily basis. And then I want to see us as a Democratic Party lay out a clear agenda focused on those economic issues that everybody is feeling every day that I hear all across this district. Healthcare, housing, electricity prices, and go down the list. And we need to not just talk about those things, but do the work outside the walls of the Capitol to build a movement to make that change possible.
As you know, some Democrats are already debating, if Democrats are to win back the House in November, whether to move to impeach President Trump. Is that something that you would support, or do you think that that would backfire?
I think this president has committed more impeachable offenses than we can count. And I want to use our oversight tools and our subpoena power to make sure that we're bringing to light the worst of those offenses. I mean, the scale of the self-enrichment and self-dealing that we're seeing, the bribery, foreign governments purchasing, buying into his crypto schemes, the selling of pardons is corruption on a scale we've never seen. And I believe that that will be so deeply offensive to the American people that we absolutely should impeach this president. But we also have to make sure that we're not just filing articles of impeachment, but that we're making the case for why that level of corruption is corrosive and destructive to our republic. And that's the part of the work that I want to see us do better.
Some Democrats say that if that were to be the focus, that that's not what voters want to see, that they want you to be squarely focused on issues like affordability. What do you say to your fellow Democrats who may disagree with you, who feel like moving to impeach President Trump is the absolute wrong move?
I think we need to do both. This president is making the affordability crisis worse every single day. His reckless war in Iran has driven up the prices of gas at the pump and fertilizer that we're paying for, in grocery prices. His across-the-board tariffs have driven up the prices of everything. So stopping the damage that he's doing is part of the mission to bring down costs. And then, as I said, we can't just do that. We also need to lay out that agenda that's focused on those big economic issues like healthcare, housing, electricity prices, childcare. Go down the list of things where the federal government actually could move the needle and make a difference if we have a Congress that has the will and if we build a Democratic Party that has the strength to actually make some change.
One of the issues you campaigned on is abolishing ICE. Let me ask you about the practicality of that. If you, in fact, do win in November, how do you deliver on that promise? What replaces ICE?
I think it's important to remember that ICE has only been around for 23 years. If ICE was a person, it wouldn't be old enough to rent a car. We've done immigration enforcement throughout our history, but we did it in a humane and lawful way. We had it as part of Immigration and Naturalization Services. We need to go back to immigration enforcement that is rooted in a broader approach to immigration policy instead of an immigration enforcement agency that has become a lawless paramilitary that operates beyond the bounds of law, that tramples on our Constitution. And I don't think that that's all that complicated. We did it for a long, long time. We can do it again.
Why not just make targeted changes to ICE, as some Democrats and even some Republicans are calling for?
Because I think the culture of ICE as agency has become unfixable. More than half the agents in ICE right now have been recruited over the last year and a half, and they've been recruited by recruitment campaigns that look like they come out of Call of Duty, that glorify violence. You have agents who are out there attracted by that glorification of violence and put out on the street without training. I think we really do need to abolish it and start over. And again, that doesn't mean not doing lawful, targeted, prioritized, sensible enforcement, but it means that this agency as it exists is not capable of doing it.
Let's talk a little bit about the future of the Democratic Party. Leader Jeffries, as you well know, backed Congressman Larson in this primary race against you. If Democrats take back the House in November, if you win, will you support Jeffries to be the next Speaker of the House?
Yes, because on day one, I want the Trump administration to be getting a whole bunch of subpoenas focused on bringing their corruption to light, not focused on a battle over who our speaker is going to be. But I do hope that the race that I just ran sends a message to the Democratic Party that we've got to get better at making change, at embracing change, that we've got to get better at recognizing that when things are broken, we can't keep doing the same thing. I hope this race helps send that message. And I hope that we can build a Democratic Party that recognizes that we will be stronger if we embrace that idea.
One of your challenges, the entire Connecticut congressional delegation backed Congressman Larson. You're talking about the path forward. How do you now join with them and move forward in a united way?
I'm 100% confident that we're going to be working hand in hand together. I know all the members of our congressional delegation from my 8 years as mayor of our capital city. I've got good relationships with them. Look, incumbents tend to support incumbents. They all have long-standing relationships with Congressman Larson. I respect that. But I look forward to getting to work with my colleagues here in Connecticut and across the country to get some real change done.
And very quickly, as we sit here today, who do you see right now as the standard bearer, the leader of the Democratic Party?
Look, I don't think we have one right now, but I think that's okay. I'm excited about seeing a large, competitive Democratic primary. I want to see a battle of different voices and different visions out there. We didn't get to have that in 2024. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're in the mess we're in right now. So I'm excited for that coming ahead. I think there's a lot of really talented Democrats out there. And I am excited to see them out there making their case, honing their message, and building a stronger party by doing the work of building their own campaigns and bringing more people in and engaging voters who may be disengaged. That's a part of the work of building a stronger movement.
Luke Bronin, thank you so very much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.